So I want to start off by talking about this principle that we see in many traditions of holistic medicine where we want to alter and adjust the way that we live our lives with the changing of the seasons, with the changing of the weather. And, a lot of people talk about, living a natural lifestyle or being holistic and things like that. And that's all great, but I think sometimes it can be seen a little bit superficially, like living a natural lifestyle. Maybe that means, they change the products that they purchase from the store, or they use herbs instead of over-the-counter medicines and things like that. But if we're really talking about adopting a natural lifestyle, to me, what that really means at its core is that we strive to live our lives every day in accordance with the rhythms and the patterns and the cycles of nature. And we can do this on a number of scales. We can do this seasonally. We can do it daily based on weather. It's about synchronizing our life with the pattern of nature. I think one of the simplest ways that we can do this is by waking up when the sun goes up and going to bed when the sun goes down, limiting our internal lights to help our melatonin levels and secretions in our brain to be better regulated in accordance with the diurnal rhythm, things like that. And one of the ways that we can do this in terms of the seasons is by altering the herbs that we typically use. And one of the ways that we primarily do that is by looking at the temperature energetics of our plants, warming plants versus cooling plants, and shifting how we use those remedies depending on the seasons. And I think this is important. And I think, to be honest, a lot of us really practice this intuitively. This is why the concept of energetics in herbal medicine and constitutional management is not rocket science. It's actually really quite simple and straightforward, and it's things that we tend to do anyways. That's why on a hot summer day, you want to eat berries and drink cold lemonade. And in the winter, you want to come in after a cold, snowy day and drink chai and have hot soup. That is intuitively practicing energetics. Eat warming things when it's cold, eat cooling things when it's hot, etc. But this, of course, is, I would say, one of the more superficial aspects of the practice of energetics in more diet and lifestyle. It does have deeper reflections when it comes to practicing clinical herbal medicine. But this concept of warmth and warming herbs really goes back to, lots of different traditions, whether we're talking Chinese medicine, Ayurveda, Greek medicine, Unani Tib. But I feel like the North American herbalist Samuel Thomson spoke to it pretty directly and clearly, where the gist of what he says is that warmth is life, cold is death. This is one of the characteristics that really differentiates a live body from a dead body. Of course, there's others, primary vital signs, heartbeat, respiration, movement, and all of that. But we do notice that temperature is a critical difference, warmth versus cold. And in Thompson's way of seeing people and the healing process is maintaining the warmth of the system as very, very important. This is why a lot of his therapeutics involved warming, hot, pungent circulatory stimulants, diaphoretic and sweating therapy, things like that. So the concept of cold pathologically is very, very important in traditional Western herbal medicine, and I would argue in other systems as well. Because cold, really when we're thinking about hot and cold, the temperature pattern of energetics, it's very easy for us modern folk to think of it in terms of degrees on a thermometer. Temperature energetics is not just degrees on a thermometer. It's not just, I feel hot or I feel cold. It is a quality. It's not a quantity. It's not a numerical degree on a thermometer. It's what are the qualities of heat? What are the qualities of cold? And when we look at the qualitative characteristics of cold, what do we see? Well, we generally see the vital force tends to collapse inwards and sink downwards. So this is where, if you submit molecules in a closed environment to cold, those molecules tend to couple together more tightly. They slow down in their movement. They become less expressive in their nature. And this is what we tend to refer to in traditional North American herbalism as a depressed tissue state, so to speak. That tissue depression or organ depression is associated with a pattern of cold. And it's interesting word choice because typically when we use the word depression or depressed, we think of it obviously more in psychological, emotional terms. But that can have a physiological application as well to other parts of the body. So if you think of how does it feel when depression sets in, right? There's a heaviness, there's a slowness, a sluggishness, oftentimes associated with fatigue. There's a lack of motivation. You just don't really want to do much of anything. You want to sleep a lot. Everything's kind of heavy and dark and weighed down. Well, take that same quality and imagine, well, what happens if that quality is going on in your liver? What if that quality is going on in your digestive system? What if that quality is going on in your circulation of blood? Okay, this helps to paint a picture of some of the qualities of cold pathological patterns in when we're considering traditional humoral medicine. So when cold, and because this is the pattern that can tend to dominate during the colder months of the year, obviously. So when cold settles in, one of the primary things that we see is it affecting digestive system, because here in the center, the solar plexus region is the central fire of the body. This is something discussed by the alchemists, also discussed in Ayurvedic medicine in terms of Agni, discussed in Chinese medicine as the triple burner. Many different systems recognize the central core heat of the system and its importance, because that is not only responsible for the proper digestion, absorption, assimilation of foods, and elimination of wastes, but also has to do with regulating and disseminating the vital heat of the body. And what we see is when that digestive fire becomes depressed or cold in nature, that it tends to radiate, or, well, the heat doesn't radiate out, but that coldness radiates out throughout the rest of the system. So we can see that the blood tends to slow down. The blood doesn't reach out to the periphery as well. People end up feeling cold hands and feet. They can end up with pale, cold skin. If the blood is not getting up into the head as well, remember, cold sinks, heat rises. So the blood may not be able to get up into the head and the brain as easily. So we can see cognitive difficulties focusing, concentrating, mental fatigue, digestion is slowed down, metabolism slows down. And one of the other dynamics with cold is that, as I noted earlier, it tends to be contractive. And this can lead to, in some, tension. It can lead to musculoskeletal tension. It can lead to neurological tension, nervousness, anxiety, insomnia, things like that. Cold can affect that. And when we see cold coupled with tension, this is one of the primary attributes of the Vata dosha imbalance in the Ayurvedic understanding and the astrological medicine understanding. This could be seen as an excess of Saturn, which is the coldest, driest of the planets, and it does have a more of a contractive, constrictive quality. So everything is slowing down basically with this cold tissue state, which is where our warming herbs come into play.